Most people never fail in life. They simply never try something big enough to discover what they're capable of. Not because they lack talent, not because they lack intelligence, but because somewhere along the way, their thinking became small. Small goals, small expectations, small lives. Aarav was one of those people. From the outside, his life looked normal. He was a student, following the same routine most people follow every day. Wake up, attend classes, scroll through his phone, watch other people succeed online, and tell himself that maybe one day his life would become something bigger. But deep down, Aarav felt something he couldn't explain. A quiet frustration. The feeling that he was capable of more, yet somehow stuck exactly where he was. Every night he watched people building businesses, creating content, speaking confidently, and achieving things that once felt impossible. And every night the same question returned. Why do some people build extraordinary lives, while others stay trapped in ordinary ones? What Aarav didn't know was that the answer to that question was about to completely change the direction of his life. Because one night while searching for that answer, he would discover a set of ideas so simple, yet so powerful, that they would force him to challenge the way he had been thinking his entire life. Ideas that would push him to confront fear, silence doubt, and take actions he never believed he was capable of. And what started as curiosity would slowly turn into a transformation. Not overnight, but step by step. Because sometimes the biggest change in a person's life begins with one dangerous idea. The idea that maybe, just maybe, their life could become much bigger than they ever allowed themselves to believe. And Aarav was about to discover the magic hidden inside that idea. The night Aarav realized something was wrong with his life, it wasn't dramatic. There was no big failure, no public humiliation, no life-shattering disaster. It was something much quieter. He was sitting on his bed, phone in his hand, scrolling through videos of people living lives that looked bigger than his. People building companies, traveling the world, speaking confidently, creating things that millions of people watched. And Aarav felt something heavy settle in his chest. Because deep down, he knew something uncomfortable. It wasn't that he didn't have dreams. He had too many. He had imagined building something big one day, maybe starting a successful online business, maybe creating content that helped people, maybe becoming someone others respected. But those dreams always lived in the future. Some vague someday. And somehow every day looked exactly the same. Wake up tired. Scroll through his phone. Watch videos about success. Feel motivated for a few minutes. Then do nothing. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And life stayed small. Not terrible. Just small. The kind of small life where nothing truly exciting happens. The kind where you always feel like you're capable of more, but never actually move toward it. That night, Aarav opened his laptop to distract himself. But instead of watching another video, he searched something different. Why do some people succeed while others stay stuck? He clicked through articles, motivation blogs, productivity tips, success stories. Most of it sounded the same. Work harder. Wake up earlier. Be disciplined. But then he saw a title that made him pause. The magic of thinking big. Something about the phrase bothered him. It sounded unrealistic. Almost childish. Thinking big. Aarav laughed quietly to himself. If thinking big worked, he muttered, everyone would be successful. Still, curiosity pulled him in. He downloaded the book. At first, he expected the usual motivational talk. But within the first few pages, one idea stopped him completely. The book said something strange. It said success isn't determined by intelligence. It isn't determined by talent. And it isn't determined by background. Instead, the biggest difference between successful people and average people is something much simpler. The size of their thinking. Aarav leaned back in his chair. He didn't fully believe it. But he also couldn't ignore something the book pointed out. Think about the people who achieve big things. They almost always believe bigger things are possible. They believe their ideas matter. They believe their efforts can change something. And slowly, Aarav realized something uncomfortable. His biggest problem wasn't laziness. It was doubt. Constant silent doubt. Every time he had an idea, another voice appeared immediately. That probably won't work. Someone else is already better. You'll embarrass yourself. People will judge you. So he stayed quiet. He stayed safe. He stayed small. And suddenly, the title of the book felt less ridiculous. Because maybe thinking big wasn't about ego. Maybe it was about permission. Permission to believe your life could actually become something larger. The next morning, Aarav woke up earlier than usual. Not because he suddenly became disciplined, but because the thought from the book kept echoing in his mind. Your life grows in proportion to the size of your thinking. While brushing his teeth, he noticed something strange. His brain constantly imagined worst-case scenarios. What if I fail? What if people laugh? What if I'm not good enough? The book explains something powerful. Most people train their minds to think small without realizing it. They imagine problems. They imagine criticism. They imagine failure. And because the mind constantly searches for proof, it eventually creates the exact life those thoughts predicted. Small thinking. Small actions. Small results. That day, Aarav decided to try something simple. Not a huge life change. Just an experiment. Every time he caught himself thinking small, he would challenge it. Later that afternoon, while scrolling social media again, he saw a creator talking about building a successful YouTube channel. His first automatic thought appeared instantly. That's impossible now, the platform is too crowded. But then he paused. That was the old pattern. Small thinking. So he forced himself to ask a different question. What if it is possible? His brain resisted immediately. But something interesting happened. Instead of shutting down the idea, his mind began exploring it. What kind of content could I make? What problems could I solve? What would make people actually watch? For the first time, the idea didn't feel like fantasy. It felt like a puzzle. That evening, Aarav returned to the book. And another line struck him hard. It said something like this. People who think small constantly search for reasons why something won't work. People who think big search for ways it could work. That difference seems tiny. But over time, it completely changes a person's life. Aarav realized he had spent years unconsciously practicing small thinking. Not because he wanted to, but because it felt safer. If you never try something big, you never risk big failure. But that safety came with a hidden cost. A life that never expands. The next week, Aarav started noticing something fascinating. Small thinking wasn't just in his head. It was everywhere. At college, when someone mentioned starting a project, the immediate response from friends was always the same. Bro, that's too hard. That won't work here. People like us can't do that. Nobody even tried exploring the possibility. The idea died instantly. And Aarav suddenly understood something from the book. Most environments train people to think small. Not intentionally, but through constant skepticism, constant doubt, constant reminders of limitations. If you absorb those voices long enough, they become your own. One evening, Aarav was sitting on the terrace of his house, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. For years, those lights had felt far away from his life. Like success belonged to other people. People who were smarter, more confident, more talented. But now a strange thought entered his mind. What if the real difference wasn't talent? What if it was simply the courage to believe bigger things were possible? That idea felt uncomfortable. Because if it was true, then his life staying small wasn't fate. It was a choice. A choice repeated every day through his thinking. The book described it in a simple but brutal way. Your mind is like a factory. Whatever thoughts you feed it, it produces matching results. Feed it doubt. It produces hesitation. Feed it possibility. It produces ideas. And slowly, Aarav began experimenting more seriously. Instead of thinking about why starting something online would fail, he asked bigger questions. What kind of channel could truly help students like me? What problems do people constantly struggle with? How could I explain ideas in a simple way? These questions changed something inside him. For the first time, he wasn't just consuming content. He was thinking like a creator. But reality still fought back. One afternoon, Aarav almost gave up again. He had tried recording his first video. It looked awkward. His voice sounded strange. He deleted the file immediately. The old voice returned. "This is embarrassing, you're not made for this." He sat quietly for a few minutes. Then he remembered another concept from the book. Big thinkers don't eliminate doubt. They outgrow it by focusing on bigger possibilities. So instead of asking, "Am I good enough to do this?" he asked something different. "What if I get better after making 50 videos?" That single question changed everything. Because suddenly, the first video didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to exist. That night, Aarav uploaded his first video. It barely got any views. But something inside him felt different. For the first time in years, he wasn't just imagining a bigger life. He had taken a step toward it. And that small step revealed something surprising. The real battle wasn't effort. The real battle was belief. Belief determines the size of your actions. And the size of your actions determines the size of your life. But Aarav still didn't understand the most dangerous enemy described in the book. An invisible force that silently destroys people's potential. A force so common that most people never even notice it controlling their lives. In the next part of the story, Aarav would confront that enemy for the first time. And what he discovered would completely change the way he saw confidence, fear, and success. Aarav didn't sleep much that night. Not because he was worried, but because something new had entered his mind, and it refused to leave. The idea that his life might actually expand if he changed the way he thought. It sounded simple. Almost too simple. But the next morning proved something important. Thinking big is easy for a moment. Living with big thinking every single day is much harder. When Aarav woke up, his phone showed the reality of his first video. Very few views. Almost no comments. And immediately the old voice returned. Quiet, familiar, comfortable. "See, this is exactly what you expected. Nothing happens. You're wasting your time." For a few seconds, Aarav stared at the screen. He felt the excitement from yesterday slowly fading. Because the truth was, thinking big doesn't magically remove disappointment. The world still reacts slowly. Progress still feels invisible. And in that moment, Aarav understood why most people quit early. It wasn't lack of motivation. It was the emotional discomfort of slow results. Still, he opened the book again while drinking his morning tea. Somewhere in the middle of the chapter, a sentence made him stop reading. It said something that sounded almost strange. Most people are not stopped by lack of opportunity. They are stopped by something much quieter. Fear. Not dramatic fear. Not life-threatening fear. But everyday fear. Fear of criticism. Fear of embarrassment. Fear of looking foolish. Fear of failing in front of others. And suddenly Aarav felt exposed. Because the night he deleted his first recording, that wasn't about skill. It was about fear. Fear of how he looked. Fear of how he sounded. Fear of what others might think if they saw it. The book described this as the silent killer of big thinking. Fear shrinks imagination. Fear shrinks actions. Fear shrinks lives. And the most dangerous part was this. Most people never realize how deeply fear controls their decisions. Aarav closed the book slowly. He thought about all the times he had stopped himself from doing something. Speaking up in class. Sharing an idea. Starting a project. Trying something creative. Every time the same invisible question appeared. What will people think? And most of the time, that question ended the idea instantly. The book explained something fascinating. Fear of criticism is not logical. It's psychological conditioning. From childhood, people learn to avoid embarrassment. Avoid mistakes. Avoid standing out too much. And slowly, they begin designing their lives around safety. Safe opinions. Safe actions. Safe ambitions. Small thinking survives inside that safety. Big thinking cannot. That afternoon, Aarav decided to test something uncomfortable. He recorded another video. This time he didn't delete it. But his hands still felt nervous while editing. Because now another thought appeared. What if my friends see this? What if someone from college sends it to a group chat? What if people laugh? He realized something brutal. The real battle wasn't creating content. The real battle was overcoming the invisible audience in his head. People who might judge him. People who might criticize him. People who might think he's trying too hard. That evening, while walking back from tuition, Aarav kept thinking about the book's idea. Fear of criticism destroys more dreams than lack of ability. And suddenly he remembered something strange. Every successful person he had watched online had critics. People in comments mocking them, doubting them, disagreeing with them. Yet somehow they kept going. Maybe confidence wasn't the absence of criticism. Maybe confidence was the decision that criticism doesn't control your actions. Later that night, Aarav sat on the terrace again. The city felt quieter. Cool air moved gently across the rooftops. And Aarav asked himself an uncomfortable question. What would I do if I genuinely didn't care about criticism? The answer came quickly. He would post more videos. He would share ideas more openly. He would experiment without worrying how it looked. He would actually try things instead of imagining them. And suddenly he understood something powerful. Fear had been quietly shrinking his actions for years. Not in dramatic ways, but in tiny daily decisions. Don't say that. Don't try that. Don't post that. Don't risk looking foolish. The next day, something interesting happened. During lunch break at college, Aarav overheard two classmates discussing a project competition. They were talking about ideas for a presentation. Normally, Aarav would have stayed silent. But this time, something pushed him forward. He suggested an idea. Simple. Not perfect. But different from what they were discussing. For a moment, both of them looked surprised. Then one of them said something unexpected. That's actually interesting. The conversation continued. The idea evolved. And Aarav realized something surprising. The fear before speaking had been much bigger than the reality after speaking. Nothing terrible happened. Nobody laughed. Nobody mocked him. And even if they had, the moment would have passed quickly. But his mind had always imagined those moments as disasters. That night he returned to the book again. The author described fear as something that grows stronger when ignored. The more you avoid situations that trigger fear, the larger it becomes. But when you confront it in small ways, it begins shrinking. Aarav started noticing fear everywhere now. When he hesitated before posting another video. When he thought about sharing his channel with someone. When he imagined talking confidently in front of others. Each time the same invisible force appeared. And each time he asked himself something simple. Is this fear protecting me or limiting me? Slowly his behavior began changing. He uploaded more videos. Not perfect ones, but consistent ones. At first the growth was tiny. A few views here. A couple of comments there. But something more important was happening. His identity was changing. He was no longer just a consumer of other people's success. He was participating in his own growth. Weeks passed. Then something unexpected happened. One of his videos performed slightly better than the others. Not viral. Not life-changing. But enough to notice. More views. More engagement. A few people even commented that the explanation was helpful. For the first time, Aarav felt a small surge of belief. Maybe this could actually work. But success has a strange side effect. It invites attention. And attention invites criticism. A few days later, Aarav opened the comments section of another video. Most responses were neutral. But one comment stood out. This guy doesn't even know what he's talking about. Another said, stop pretending to be a motivational guru. Aarav felt the familiar discomfort again. His stomach tightened slightly. For a moment, he considered deleting the video. Or maybe even stopping altogether. The voice returned. This is embarrassing. People are judging you. But then he remembered something powerful from the book. People who think small let criticism control their direction. People who think big expect criticism as part of the journey. Because whenever you step slightly outside the average path, someone will question it. Not always out of malice. Sometimes out of their own fear. Aarav looked at the comments again. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling defeated, he felt curious. Why did criticism feel so heavy? Why did one negative comment outweigh 10 positive ones? The answer was simple. His mind was trained to protect his ego, to avoid discomfort, to return to safety. But growth required something different. The ability to continue moving even when not everyone approves. That realization changed how he saw the comments. They were no longer signs of failure. They were signs that he had finally stepped into the arena, where opinions exist, where people react, where progress actually happens. Over the next month, Aarav continued uploading. Not every video performed well. Some barely moved. But his confidence was no longer tied to instant results. Because something deeper had shifted. He was slowly building mental resistance. Resistance to doubt. Resistance to fear. Resistance to criticism. And the more he practiced thinking big, the more opportunities began appearing in unexpected ways. People from his college started noticing his channel. A few even asked how he explained topics so simply. One evening, a junior student messaged him asking for advice about studying more effectively. That moment felt strange. Just months ago, Aarav had been the one searching for guidance. Now someone else saw value in his ideas. It wasn't fame. It wasn't success yet. But it was proof. Proof that thinking bigger had already changed the direction of his life. Still, something inside him felt incomplete. He had learned to think bigger. He had started overcoming fear of criticism. But the book hinted at something even more powerful. A principle that separated people who merely start things from people who build extraordinary lives. A principle about action. Because thinking big creates possibility. Confidence removes fear. But without a certain type of behavior, those ideas never fully transform reality. And Aarav was about to discover that principle in a way he never expected. One event, one decision, would soon force him to confront the final and most powerful idea of the entire book. And when that moment arrived, his life would never feel small again. The message arrived on a quiet Sunday evening. Aarav had just finished uploading another video. It wasn't perfect, but perfection had stopped being his goal weeks ago. Consistency had replaced it. He closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair, stretching his tired shoulders. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Then his phone vibrated. A notification from an unknown email. At first he ignored it. Most emails were spam or random promotions, but something about the subject line caught his attention. It simply said, "Opportunity." Curious, Aarav opened it. The message was short. Someone who had been watching his videos for a few weeks wrote that they liked the way he explained ideas simply. They were organizing a small online student seminar about productivity and learning methods, and they wondered if Aarav would be interested in speaking for a few minutes. Aarav read the message twice, then 3 times. His heart began beating faster. Speaking. In front of people. Not behind a camera where mistakes could be edited. But live. Instantly the old feeling returned. Fear. But this fear was different from before. It wasn't about posting a video. It was about stepping into a larger version of himself. And his mind reacted exactly the way it always had. You're not ready. You'll embarrass yourself. What if you forget what to say? For a few minutes Aarav simply stared at the screen. Months ago the answer would have been obvious. He would have politely declined. He would have said he was busy. Or that someone else would be better. And life would quietly continue the same way. Small. Safe. Predictable. But something inside him had changed. Because the past few months had already proven something powerful. Thinking bigger had opened doors. Overcoming fear of criticism had allowed him to walk through some of them. But now he was standing in front of a much larger door. And suddenly he remembered a chapter from the book he had read weeks earlier. It described something the author called the cure for hesitation. The simple habit that separates dreamers from builders. And the idea was surprisingly direct. Successful people develop the habit of action. They don't wait for perfect confidence. They don't wait for perfect preparation. They move. Quickly. Decisively. Because action does something thinking alone never can. It creates momentum. Aarav stared at the email again. His fingers hovered above the keyboard. And before his mind had time to create more excuses, he typed two simple words. I'm interested. Then he pressed send. For a moment he sat frozen. His heart was racing. Not because he had solved everything, but because he had just committed himself to something uncomfortable. Something uncertain. Something bigger than his usual routine. And strangely, that feeling was exciting. The event was scheduled 2 weeks later. 14 days. Not a lot of time. As the days passed, Aarav felt the pressure building. Recording videos was one thing. Speaking live was another. There would be no edits. No retakes. Just him. His voice. And his ideas. Doubt tried returning. Every morning new worries appeared. What if you freeze? What if people realize you're not an expert? What if nobody cares? But now Aarav understood something about those thoughts. They were normal. Fear didn't disappear when life expanded. It simply appeared at higher levels. And the book had explained something important about that. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to move forward anyway. So Aarav began preparing. Not obsessively, but deliberately. He started writing down ideas he had learned while building his small channel. Lessons about thinking bigger. Lessons about overcoming fear. Lessons about taking action before feeling ready. And while writing, he noticed something fascinating. These ideas weren't just theories anymore. They were experiences. Just a few months earlier, Aarav had been stuck in the same cycle most people live in. Endless planning. Endless watching. Endless imagining. But very little doing. Now his life felt different. Not perfect. Not wildly successful yet. But moving. And movement created energy. The night before the seminar, Aarav stood again on the terrace of his house. The same terrace where months ago he had stared at the distant city lights and felt small. Tonight the lights looked different. Not because the city had changed, but because he had. He remembered the night he first downloaded the book. The night he questioned whether thinking big was even realistic. Back then the idea had felt almost ridiculous. But now he understood something deeper. Thinking big wasn't about arrogance. It was about refusing to trap your life inside unnecessary limitations. The next evening arrived faster than he expected. Aarav sat in front of his laptop. The seminar platform was already open. Small video windows showed other participants joining. Students from different places, different backgrounds, all curious about improving their lives. His name appeared on the speaker list. Seeing it there made his stomach tighten again. He took a slow breath. Then another. The host began introducing the session. Soon it would be Aarav's turn. His mind raced. But suddenly he remembered something powerful from the book. Action eliminates fear. Thinking increases it. So instead of analyzing every possible mistake, he focused on something simpler. Helping. If even one person gained something useful from his experience, the effort would be worth it. When his turn arrived, the host called his name. Aarav unmuted his microphone. For a brief moment, silence filled the room. Then he began speaking. His voice felt slightly nervous at first. But after the first few sentences, something shifted. Because he wasn't pretending to be someone else. He was simply telling the truth. He told them about the night he realized his life felt small. He told them about discovering the idea of thinking bigger. He described how doubt had controlled his actions for years, and how fear of criticism had silently shaped his choices. He talked about uploading the first awkward video, about reading negative comments, about wanting to quit, but continuing anyway. And as he spoke, something surprising happened. People started responding in the chat. Messages appeared. That's exactly how I feel. I always overthink starting things. Fear of judgment stops me too. Aarav realized something important in that moment. The struggles he thought were personal were actually universal. Almost everyone lives with the same invisible barriers. Small thinking, fear of criticism, hesitation to act. And suddenly, the final idea from the book became crystal clear in his mind. The principle that connected everything. Success isn't about intelligence. It isn't about talent. And it isn't about perfect opportunities. It's about the combination of three habits: thinking bigger than your current situation, refusing to let fear of criticism control your actions, and most importantly, developing the habit of acting on ideas quickly. Because ideas alone don't change lives. Action does. Aarav finished his talk with a simple story. He told them about the version of himself sitting on his bed months earlier, scrolling through other people's success, feeling stuck, feeling uncertain, waiting for the perfect moment to start. And then he explained something powerful. That perfect moment never arrives. Confidence never appears before action. It appears because of action. After the seminar ended, Aarav closed his laptop slowly. His room was quiet again. But the silence felt different. There was a strange calm in his chest. Not excitement. Not relief. Something deeper. Clarity. For the first time in his life, Aarav understood the true meaning of the book he had read. The magic of thinking big wasn't mystical. It was psychological. When you expand the size of your thinking, you expand the size of your actions. When you stop fearing criticism, you unlock courage. And when you combine those two with decisive action, your life begins moving in directions you once believed were impossible. Over the following months, Aarav's journey continued. His channel slowly grew. Not overnight, but steadily. More importantly, his mindset kept expanding. He started collaborating with others, experimenting with new ideas, building projects he would have never imagined attempting before. And the most interesting change wasn't external success. It was internal identity. He no longer saw himself as someone waiting for opportunity. He had become someone who created it. One evening, nearly a year after he first opened the book, Aarav returned to the same terrace again. The city lights shimmered across the horizon. Cars moved like tiny streams of glowing dots. People everywhere living their own stories. Some trapped in small thinking. Some slowly expanding beyond it. Aarav leaned against the railing and smiled quietly. Because now he understood something he wished someone had told him years earlier. Most limits in life are self-created. They exist in thoughts long before they exist in reality. The moment you challenge those thoughts, possibilities begin expanding. And the real magic isn't in the book. It isn't in motivational speeches. It isn't even in the ideas themselves. The magic happens the moment a person decides to believe their life can become bigger, and then takes the first step toward proving it. Because somewhere right now, someone is sitting exactly where Aarav once sat, scrolling through other people's achievements, wondering if their own life could ever become something more. And the truth is simple. It can, but only if they make one small but powerful decision. To stop thinking small, to stop fearing criticism, and to start acting on the bigger vision inside their mind. Because the size of your life will never exceed the size of your thinking. And the moment you truly begin thinking bigger, your entire world begins expanding with you. At the beginning of this story, Aarav was just another person living a quiet, ordinary routine. Not because he lacked dreams, but because he had slowly learned to think small. He spent his days watching other people build extraordinary lives while convincing himself that those kinds of achievements belonged to someone else. Someone more confident, someone more talented, someone more prepared. And without realizing it, that belief shaped every decision he made. Every idea he ignored. Every opportunity he avoided. Every risk he refused to take. But then something simple happened. A single idea entered his mind. The idea that the real limit in his life wasn't talent or opportunity or intelligence. It was the size of his thinking. That realization was the beginning of everything. When Aarav started thinking bigger, possibilities he once ignored began appearing everywhere. When he stopped letting fear of criticism control his actions, he started sharing his ideas instead of hiding them. And when he finally developed the habit of taking action instead of endlessly overthinking, his life began moving in a completely different direction. Not instantly. Not perfectly, but steadily. The version of Aarav who once sat alone scrolling through other people's success slowly transformed into someone creating his own path. Someone who spoke, shared ideas, built projects, and inspired others who felt exactly the way he once did. And that transformation reveals the most powerful truth hidden inside the lessons of this book. Your life rarely becomes bigger than the way you think about it. Small thinking creates small actions. Small actions create small results. But the moment your thinking expands, your actions expand with it. And over time, those actions begin building a life that once seemed impossible. The most powerful part of this story is not Aarav's success. It's the realization that Aarav was never special. He started exactly where millions of people are right now. Feeling stuck, feeling uncertain, wondering if their life could become something more. The difference began the moment he stopped accepting the limits inside his own mind. And the same moment exists for anyone listening to this story right now. Because somewhere in your mind there is already an idea, a goal, or a vision that feels slightly bigger than your current life. The question is simple. Will you shrink that idea to fit your comfort? Or will you grow your thinking until your life expands to meet it? Because the real magic of thinking big isn't just dreaming about a larger future. It's becoming the kind of person who takes action toward it. And sometimes, the biggest transformation in your life begins with one quiet decision. The decision to stop thinking small. If this story made you reflect on your own life, take a moment to like this video so more people can discover these ideas. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful book summaries that can transform the way you think and live. And in the comments, tell me the biggest insight you took from this story. Because sometimes the idea that changes your life begins with a single thought you decide to take seriously.